Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Wild, and I am your host on this streaming platform. Whether you are listening on podcast or you are watching here on YouTube, welcome and come on in. My name is Lauren Wild. I'm a professional astrologer, celestial channel, and spiritual coach and teacher of all sorts. I tend to take more of a interest and predominant lens on the feminine face of consciousness. But I digress because astrology is for everyone, because astrology is, in fact, the language of consciousness. So, without going too much further into all of that, let's go ahead and start talking about the astrology for the second half of August. So, many astrologers, myself included, we have been talking about the fact that the middle of August until about the middle of October are they're definitely turbulent. Let's just say that. And then once we get to November, we'll be at election period here in the States, which not to be US centric, but it's pretty big deal for the entire world because of what we're up against here in the States. And so I'll save that for another conversation though. What we're going to talk about today is mainly going to be this third quarter of the year, but even more so specifically from the time of this recording, which is August the 14th, to about September the 17th, which is when we have our first eclipse, which will be a lunar eclipse at 25 degrees of Pisces. And that starts to kick off the Pisces Virgo nordal. I just mixed a word. North node switch. That axis will begin to switch from Aries and Libra into Pisces and Virgo here soon, but it won't make that full switch, which is very interesting for a person that could be born on September 17th of this coming year. Their nodal axis would be rare because their north node and their south node would not be in the same axis, which is a really unique and karmic expression for a soul to process in a lifetime, to not have them exactly opposite. I've only seen it a few times in people's charts. It's rare. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm recording this session today on August the 14th, and it's a pretty significant day because Mars is in exact conjunction to Jupiter at 16 degrees of Gemini. Now, this is important, and we're going to talk a little bit about the planetary influences of Mars, Gemini, and Jupiter, as well as the aspect that it's trying to work on exacting and perfecting, which will be exact on Saturday here in the States in Eastern Standard Time, which is the Saturn square, all at 16 degrees. So I'll talk about that more in detail here in a second. One of the other really, really important things that's coming up is going to be the full moon. It's a full super moon at 27 degrees of Aquarius on Monday, August the 19th. That is going to rock our socks because of the fact that Mercury will be retrograde within a 1 degree orb. There will be a cazimi the day before. So it'll be in a conjunction, a tight conjunction with the sun and the moon. So sun, moon, and Mercury all at 26 to 27 degrees of Leo. And the sun and moon will be exactly opposite Uranus, which is still direct at 27 degrees of Taurus. This is like big, like the amount of intensity is mind-boggling. Gives us a little bit of a flavor of what's coming, because on the new moon in Virgo 2 weeks later, that is when Uranus is also going to station retrograde and start to bring a lot of this stuff up to the surface to be dealt with on the internal. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about all the players in the sky right now. So as of right now, the sun is in Leo. It's in the second decan. I think it's at 22 degrees of Leo today at the time of this recording. Anytime the sun is in a zodiac sign, like it is right now in the sign of Leo, it starts to shine and really put a light on those zodiac signs themes, as well as it shines a light on the part of your natal chart that it embodies. And so you would want to look at where Leo is in your chart. That house is going to tell you a lot about what's really being highlighted for you at this time. All right. Now, not only is the sun there, but Mercury is also retrograde. Now, it's been retrograde for a week, but it's been in Virgo, in about the middle degrees of Virgo. It started at 8 degrees of Virgo. And it's going to pull all the way back into Leo tonight, as a matter of fact, around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you'll see that Mercury takes on a different flavor that it does in Virgo that it does in Leo. So when Mercury is in Virgo, it's very detail oriented, it's very analytical, it's very considerate about its health. It's more internal because Virgo is the sign of the hermit. Whereas when Mercury retrograde moves into Leo, it takes on an aspect of drama. It also really starts to shine a light on issues around our fathers. Could be bringing up father wounds, could be bringing up abandonment issues, could be bringing up issues around leadership and also masculinity in general. All right. And so those are some of the other things. Also, the cowardly lion syndrome that's associated with Leo. We may find ourselves having to push on some things that we may be afraid of. They may start coming up to the surface. All right. So there's all of that. Now let's talk about Jupiter reaching the middle point of its intensity in Gemini and what that does. So I talk a lot about this because I have personally dated. Have you been personally assaulted by dating people with Mars and Virgo? Raise your hand. Yes. It is probably my personal least favorite aspect is Mars and Gemini. Very, very smart individual. Very, very brilliant, can keep a conversation going, is very mentally penetrating. But the archetype is cruelty of the mind and swords, the tongue as a sword. So it can be very biting, it can be harsh, it can be cruel, literally like cold, and be cruel with its mouth, with its words. It can be mean, really. And so it's one of my least favorite aspects, to be fully honest. But what are the benefits of it is that it creates a lot of clarity in the mind. And when that clarity in the mind comes, it can be kind of brutal, you know. Now, the fact that we have Jupiter there, which is the great benefic, it can soften the blow a little bit if we're willing to have a growth mindset. All right. If we're not willing to have a growth mindset, then Jupiter can actually just expand negative feelings and we could just spiral into the abyss of anxiety that Gemini, Mars and Gemini, in its natural habitat, if you will, is kind of slated to be from an archetypal perspective. So with Jupiter in there, Jupiter is, yes, the great benefic. And a lot of people want to talk about Jupiter, you know, being lucky and jubilant. You know, one of the other names is Jove. I've always thought that that would be a pretty girl's name, Jove. But one of the other aspects of Jupiter is justice and the teacher and the overcomer. And so one of the things that Jupiter requires, and I'm a Sagittarius rising, so I'm ruled by Jupiter. I feel like I know a lot about Jupiter. My sun is in an exact trine to Jupiter in Aquarius, is that it really requires us to have a lot of hope and a lot of faith in something bigger than us. It requires you to have what I like to say in my coaching practice, like a North Star. Because when things get hard and things get rough, if we do not have something to believe in, it and we look at the world and the state of it as it is, it can become very dim. And so for me, my like great purpose is my children. They are my great purpose in this life, is not only my children, but becoming and cultivating within myself as an individual. This is part of my life path journey with an Aries moon, is to be able to create security, stability, and an anchoring within myself as an authentic person to provide for them, right? To be financially stable and abundant. That's like literally my life purpose. And that has come with a lot. That's come with a lot of hardship. I've been married twice. Neither time it worked out for various reasons, but I digress. But what I've had to really lean into, especially over this summer, is recognizing this is my purpose. It's bigger than me. I have to pick myself up from my bootstraps, if you will, and continue to move forward, integrating the challenges and the lessons. This is a very Jupiterian concept to overcome and step fully into my growth potential and expand. Jupiter. All right. For me to be the expander that I need to be, I need to learn. And that is why Jupiter is also the teacher of the zodiac. And so, in taking all of that into consideration, when we think about Mars and we think about Jupiter in Gemini, we're talking about mindset, having an expansive, growth-oriented mindset that is rooted in faith in something bigger than ourselves, something bigger than our spirals, than our anxiety attacks, than looking back on our past, looking back at our wounding, especially if you were born in the years of like 1983 through, I think, 1990-ish. And that is the generation like I am that has Chiron in Gemini. So it really is, and that's the generation of what they call the wounded mind. That was like the big breakout of ADHD in the 90s. We can't sit still, right? We're hyper attuned to everything. And that's really getting highlighted for a lot of people born in particularly that generation. If you find yourself there, is really highlighting, you know, these very powerful attunements that our minds have to pick up on everything and everyone and want to desperately be understood and resonated with, right? Like to be understood is a very Gemini concept. But the other aspect of it is it brings up issues around siblings because of Gemini ruling the twins. It brings up issues of siblings. So there may not be something going on with you, but that may be going on with a sibling. It could bring up challenges around siblings, particularly brothers. And then some of the other aspects could be a need to go back to school because the third house rules, particularly your elementary and middle school experience. The fifth house is when you get closer to like, you know, middle school, high school. But that third house, which is ruled by Mercury and Gemini, is very much about your early childhood experience, the religions that you grew up in, the traditions, the structures, the mindsets that your parents programmed you in. All of those things is what that's really about. And with Jupiter and Mars, you could find those things really starting to expand and potentially even clash if you're not willing to look at it with a growth and expansion mindset, meaning instead of taking it personally, you're like, wow, I learned so much by looking back at this part of my life versus being like, oh my God, I'm never going to change. This is who I am. My parents instilled this in me and I could never change. That's not a growth mindset. And that's not very Jupiterian, right? We could spiral. So I want to start to bring in the concept of Saturn and then get into this full moon and some of the other really major aspects that I'm seeing popping up that are on my personal radar. Every astrologer is different. Every astrologer has a different focus. I'm really starting to lean into the fact that, and it's funny because on January 1st, I always pull a card, which is like, what is the astrological thing that I'm going to be working on the most this year? And the two cards that I pulled were Uranus and Chiron. Well, personally, I have Uranus natally right on my ascendant, and I have Chiron natally right on my descendant. They're exactly opposite one another. And that's a channel. That's actually a very specific channel. If you have that too, they call that the inventor aspect. They also say that it is a channeling aspect where we naturally are able to channel potentially ET kind of intelligence, which that's another conversation. If anybody wants to talk about that, let me know, because I could talk about that stuff all day. That's what a large part of my summer has been about, is downloading a new channel that is on a frequency higher than my body could withstand. And it made me sick. But again, I digress, and I'll talk about that in another session. If you guys are interested as listeners, just let me know. But in regards to what I see right now is we have to become aware of our minds and our mindset programming from early childhood. And we have to, number one, become aware of it. Number two, we have to confront it, right? We have to become aware of it. And number three, we have to integrate it, right? So Mars in Gemini, again, like I said, cruelty of the mind. I've been seeing a lot of influencers on social media talking about killing versions of themselves so they could become who they are today. Well, I'm very attuned to IFS, internal family systems, and parts work. Also, I work in shamanism and a lot of psychopumping. And I will tell you, I have never, ever, ever seen or experienced a client, or even myself in my own process, where killing some part of ourselves is actually compassionate or effective to our entire system. Because that part of you is probably an inner child or an inner adolescent that is keeping you alive, or a loyal soldier that you crafted to keep you alive. They're not your enemies. Very rarely is it some sort of entity outside of yourself. Doesn't mean it's not possible. Trust me, does not mean it's not possible. But usually, when they're very negative, they are the voice of someone else outside of your system, aka a shitty ex, a narcissistic parent, a controlling old pastor, whatever, name it, but very rarely is it you. Because when you really get down to the bottom of it, usually it is a part of you that is younger and needs to be integrated to the age you are now, and it needs a lot of compassion and is reaching out for you. In the world of IFS and healing, we call this reparenting. So killing off a part of ourself, is very Mars and Gemini. I keep seeing it. We're like, I wanted to be this, so I killed this version of me. I can't imagine killing Lauren Burba. I'm so grateful for Lauren Burba. I'm so grateful for Lauren Kinlaw, because those versions of me that previously existed got me here today. And they fought for so much for me to be Lauren Wild. Like, it could make me cry. And so it's really important to understand that all parts of you belong. All parts of you want to keep you alive. The part that's necessary, however, is the awareness, the compassion, the reparenting, and ultimately the reintegration of that younger part of yourself into the current timeline you're in now, right? And if you're interested in that stuff, please just reach out to me. I only do that work one-on-one with people, which is a lot of quantum reparenting. And I mean, that's a lot of what IFS is. The other thing I want to name is that IFS, internal family systems, is ruled by Gemini. And shamanic practitioners and astrologers have been practicing a version of parts work forever. And that is, we all have Aries in us. We all have Gemini in us. We all have Scorpio in us. What does that part of you need to feel fulfilled? What part of you needs to feel this to feel authentic? What part of your life is constantly transforming? Where you have Scorpio and Uranus in your chart, those parts of you are always changing, right? So there's lots and lots and lots of different ways and tools to get into this work, this field of work. However, what I want you to pay attention to is the multidimensionality of the self and the way that we are approaching it. That Mars in Gemini wants to be very clear cut. It wants to just like cut things off, even if it hurts. And I just want to name that because it can cause some issues. It can be cruel, actually. And then the next piece on the subject of cruel, let's discuss Saturn squaring this aspect this weekend. All right. So as if it wasn't already enough, we've got Saturn retrograde. Currently, at the time of this recording, it's at 17 degrees of Pisces. Well, it's going to drop all the way to 16 degrees this weekend and create an exact square to that Mars and Jupiter and Gemini aspect. So during this time period, we could come really face to face with our limitations. We could come really face to face with the restrictions, the boundaries, the limits of our mind, the limits of our body. And it feels like a cement wall that you're just like pushing up against and you can't go anywhere. Now, Saturn is also known as Kronos and the ruler of time, money, and space. In a lot of ways, he is also associated with the old concept of the devil, which is the ruler of this 3D realm. So it's about form, it's about time, and it's about money. All right. Saturn also just happens to be the ruler of Capricorn, which is the patriarchy, right? Literally the patriarch, grandfather of the zodiac. So in saying all of this, when we're working with Saturn, time is a very important part of it. The other aspect of it is the aspect of karma. Saturn rules karma. And so there is something coming up that is karmically tied to you and this lifetime that, you know, depending on how you look at it, like I said, growth mindset or spiral mindset, that you can either develop some sort of skill and resilience, which Saturn is very much about resilience and skillfulness. Other great mental health tool to work with would be DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. If I was going to finish my psych degree, it would be in specializing in DBT because I believe in it that much. But it is about becoming skillful with our minds. And another great concept of that would be in DBT, they have, you know, the polarity of the emotion mind and the rational mind. And in between, there is the wise mind. And so that is another really powerful mental health related tool that maybe you can check out. What does it mean to cultivate a wise mind? But in saying all of that, the things that come up this weekend are largely karmically assigned to us to work all the way through. I'm sure you guys have heard the only way through is through. Well, the only way through is through. One of the other aspects with Saturn involved is that time is a piece of the puzzle. So if you're like really, really feeling the pressure of something, it's probably about time, the speed at which something is moving or slowing down. But when it comes to Saturn, you cannot move faster than the pace of a ticking clock. All right. Saturn requires us to do the hard work, to buckle up, buttercup, to push through hard things. All right. It's not Neptune. Neptune wants to dissolve things. It can just escape. It's not Neptune. We're going to talk about Neptune later. This is about Saturn. Saturn says you need to develop the skills, the resilience, and the persistence to overcome the challenge in front of you. Yes, you're going to develop gray hairs doing it, but you will become wiser for it. So it's not all aspects are like this, guys. All right. But it's very much about get your wits about you, the mind, Gemini, and decide, right? Decide to overcome this challenge by overcoming your mindset and applying new skills to overcome this challenge, because the block is probably somewhere around your mindset. Okay. So mindset coaching is helpful in that way too, which that I do. All right. I do a lot of that with people as narrative work and mindset work. So let's talk just a little bit more about the events coming up in the middle, and let's go ahead and move into the full moon in Aquarius. So some final thoughts on that is be gentle with yourself when Saturn's involved. Also, it requires you drink a lot of water. I mean, I'm a big water person in general, but Saturn is known to be dry. Like it has a dry, cold aspect to it. It's tied to bones, teeth, the skeletal structures, concrete, and buildings. And so, you know, it can be structural in nature. And with Mercury retrograde, it can be like you're restructuring something in your life for it to be more successful and sustainable. Okay. Because we don't want to forget about the fact that at the end of the day, Pluto is retrograde. Now it's at 0 degrees of Aquarius right now, but it is about to be at 29 degrees of Capricorn for the last time in 250 years. And it will do that this fall, right around the time of election here in the States, which is very intense indeed. All right. Let's talk about the fact that on August 19th, the sun is going to square Uranus at the exact same time, just about. I think it's like a 2-hour difference. Yeah, it's 2-hour difference. And then we have a full moon. So let me go ahead and share the screen. If you are listening, then just hang tight. I'm still sharing the channeled information, but if you do want to see what I'm talking about, you will see the link in the description of the podcast where you can go and you can actually watch this portion if you would like. All right. So at the time of the full moon, we are going to have the sun over here at 27 degrees of Leo. That is also where we're going to see the moon over here across at 27 degrees of Aquarius. Anytime the sun and the moon are exactly opposite from each other, we have a full moon. In the mix, we'll also have Mercury retrograde. The day before, we'll have the sun and Mercury come into a cazimi, meaning that they will join hands. They will work together. And then the next day, we have Uranus. Now, let's talk for a moment about Mercury and Uranus and the sun. So, Mercury is the planet of communication, flight, thought, our minds. It's very communication driven. All right. But then Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury in the sense of communication. So in Thoth and in Tarot, the Eight of Wands is associated with Mercury and Sagittarius. And it's also associated with like Mercury and Uranus and Sagittarius, which is the speed of light. All right. So Uranus is also typically associated with God mind, which is like out of body awareness. Another word for that is transpersonal awareness. All right. It's very evolutionary oriented. It's very 4D to 5D levels of consciousness. So it's above our typical operating systems of the human psyche, which is 3D. All right. So what this is about is quantum leaping. I predict that we're going to hear so much more about consciousness and quantum leaping as Pluto gets back into Aquarius, and it stays in Aquarius as of next year. And with this aspect, and then Uranus moving into Gemini in 2025, we are really moving forward. The human consciousness is elevating. It's picking up. We're really illuminating new forms of information. I really think that, part of Pluto and Aquarius is about the conversation on consciousness, especially as we, start to think about AI, and then eventually it's going to be, aliens that's coming. It's the age of Aquarius. We're only like 80 years into a 2100 year period of time. And so with the sun and Mercury in a conjunction, joining hands, they are bringing extra vision, extra light to the matter of wherever 27 to 26 degrees of Leo is in your natal birth chart. All right. Now, some general topics could be about your parent, your father, particularly Leo rules the father. It could be about parenting. It could be about creative endeavors. It could be about music. It could be about theater. It could be about some aspect of creative energy, including things like childbirth and pregnancy. So be careful. But this is very much about the generative creative process. And Leo is very much about the self. All right. Leo is like me. All right. It's ruled by the sun, and the sun rules our ego. So it's about me. Whereas Aquarius is about everyone. It's about us. It's about the collective. And they're opposite each other for a reason, right? So the sun being a ball of fire and light, and Uranus, which rules Aquarius, being an ice planet. Okay. So like one of my favorite things to say about Aquarius is it's like, I love humanity, but I don't like people. Right. And that's a very Aquarian mindset. It's God mind, right? So it's very detached. It's like, this is for the benefit of all. This is for the benefit of everyone. This isn't for the benefit of one person. This is for the benefit of everyone. So it's very humanitarian. It's very technologically advanced. I do predict that we're going to get some new technological advances, particularly in the area of consciousness and mindset. Like, I would not be surprised if we look back about a year from now and there was all of these different forms of technology that hooks into our consciousness and like elevates our consciousness, or allows us to like project an image into the future, to create a board game or a video game. Like, I would not be surprised if any of that stuff is like crafted and launched at this time period. But it's very much about this paradox between me, like me as an individual, and we. And it's different than Aries and Libra, right? That's very relationship oriented. This is about like everyone. This is about, even like a household, because Leo is very tied to the household. Versus it being just one person, it's about the household. Whereas Aquarius is like the household is the world. We are a species known as human, right? This isn't, your 4 people in your home and your dog kind of household. This is like the whole world kind of household. So it's going to illuminate something about this, some sort of clarity on the higher level. On the personal level, again, you need to know where is 26 and 27 degrees of Leo and Aquarius in your chart, because man, there is like a big awareness that's popping. Okay. Big awareness that's popping. Now, at this time period, we are really and truly like getting down into the nitty gritty of, Jupiter and Mars and Saturn and all of them playing in this big field of like, what is this limitation? And Uranus might be showing us how to break through something. In saying that, Uranus is also tied to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tsunamis and tornadoes. So it brings a level of chaos. And so we take that off. One of the things that I say a lot about Uranus, I have Uranus on my ascendant, which is complicated because it's very destabilizing, especially when, what you're craving is stability. And so you really have to understand this concept of like, sometimes, a windstorm comes in to blow away all of the things that are creating blocks to your breakthrough. So you do have to have, again, that growth mindset that is like, what is not for me? What is for me will not pass me by. Rejection is protection. Betrayal is a realignment. Like these mantras, right? These ideas that, you are, you're protected and you're safe. And when you really lean into your authenticity and the alignment around your authenticity, then you're protected because of the fact that you are moving with your soul. Okay. Now, a lot of what I just said right there is a lot of the teachings that I bring into my school. And I'm literally like, my Leo for me is all in my 9th house. I'm completely restructuring my brand, completely restructuring my image and my coaching opportunities. And so why I share all of that is because my program Awaken, which is a group coaching program, is launching this weekend. And it's very much so about this method that I've created, working with people, moving through their spiritual awakening or their like in between paradox process, which is, I know I'm not who I was back then, but I'm not exactly who I want to be yet either. And I'm stuck in the middle and I don't know what to do about it. That's me. I'm your girl. I'm your cosmic cowgirl that's going to help you tread through the galaxy of figuring out who you are, what you want, what you value, and how you're going to anchor that in and embody it moving forward. So, with all of that to say, if you have any interest in having a guide and having a lot of awareness as to how to move through different mindsets, move through different challenges, to utilize the wisdom of astrology, human design, all of these ancient esoteric practices that are meant to help us to dissolve our ego so we can rebuild it in a way that serves us versus the other way around. We need an ego to survive. Okay. We do, unless you're lucky enough to just be able to, go and move to India and live in an ashram and be a renunciate from society. Then you need an ego, to survive, especially if you're a householder. The thing is that at some point you're going to have to reconstruct it. And in my opinion, I think everyone is having to reconstruct their consciousness because the whole world is experiencing a Kundalini awakening. That is what Uranus has been in Taurus, the earth, for the last 8 years, right? We're coming to that last bit. And then when Uranus moves into Gemini next year, this is about the mind. It's about elevating the mind. It's about bringing higher levels of consciousness up. And then when Neptune moves into Aries, this is about dissolving this concept of self, and really thinking about what it means to be a part of a global consciousness. The universe is preparing us for this. And I think it's going to get darker before it gets brighter. I'm not going to lie to you. But luckily, I have I have gone to the very bottom pit of hell, and I've definitely tread the underworld many times. I know the keys. I'm not afraid of the dark at this point, and I can definitely help shed light and illuminate the pathway for you. Ultimately, you have to be the one that falls to bones, finds the boon, and puts yourself back together. But I can definitely help you in the process as you do. So I hope that this is helpful for you. One other final thing I want to touch on for just a moment is recognizing that as we hit this weekend, we are officially in the pre-eclipse period. We get our first eclipse in the Pisces axis, like I spoke on earlier, to really and truly get ready, because it's a lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse is a release, a surrender, a letting go. All right. And that's at 25 degrees of Pisces. And then 2 weeks later, we have our solar eclipse at 10 degrees of Libra in an exact conjunction to Black Moon Lilith at 10 degrees of Libra, which shall be quite interesting. So I hope that this was helpful for you. If you are looking for ways to book a one-on-one reading with me, or you're interested in coaching or learning more, or getting involved in the work, check the notes below. You'll see all of that down there. You can also see a link to join the newsletter, as I will be getting back into doing transmissions and sharing what's going on again, because it's right and good. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me. I will catch you on our next episode.